And here we have it, guys, the amazing 2204 horizontal input. Yeah, this has been Marshall moved to this style of high and low input jacks simply because they wanted to PCB mount the whole lot, right? So the earlier 2204s, you know, the JMP era and the early 800s, as you probably know, PCB based, but the PCB was on standoffs in the middle of the chassis and we had chassis mount pots. And they moved to these PCB mount pots, and the whole PCB is basically held in there. There's no standoffs. It's just held in by the pots themselves and these jacks here. And, you know, certainly reliable, right? As a construction method, it's fine. Quite easy to work on. If you need to, need to tech these things, you can basically just pull the knobs off the pots, unscrew the pots, and the whole board will come out and flip over. So from a kind of tech perspective, they're pretty easy to work on. Now, we have had a listen to this thing, and I agree with the owner, which is it's intolerably bright. And this amp had been modded, I'm told, and was put back to stock. It's not stock. I've had a couple of minutes to look at this thing, and I'll run through what I've noticed, just high level here, and we'll zoom in and I'll show you kind of what's going on. But it's a it's a 2204 JCM800, right? So you probably know what you'd expect to see is a 2K7 cathode and a 10K cold clipper, which is this one here, this cathode resistor here, which has been changed. So they are there. That's 2K7. This is a 10K, but both of them have got bypass caps on them. We would expect a bypass cap on the 2K7, right? In a Marshall, that's 0.68 microfarad all day long. You do not have a bypass cap on the 10K cathode in a 2204 or a 2203 for that matter, unless you're modding it and you know what you're doing. You put a bypass cap over the top of a 10K cathode, all hell breaks loose. Now, it can be done to good effect, as you see in things like an SIR34 style mod, and there's other mods that do that kind of thing, right? But, this was done without any, any attempt to make it sound good, any knowledge of what they were doing, perhaps. I'll show you what these values are. We'll zoom in and have a look, right? Everything else kind of looks stock. It's had a few caps changed, with this one here, a few resistors and so on changed, but by and large this stuff's pretty original. It's obviously had bias caps swapped out, which is nice to see. It's been recapped. These are all new filter caps here, right? F&Ts, which is cool. So there has been some nice work done on it. This mod stuff though is not good, and I had to laugh at this stuff. So someone's put all this shielded coax in here, or worked with the shielded coax, but they haven't grounded the shield. So we'll do that. Let me zoom in and I'll show you what's going on. So let's have a look at this 2K7 cathode here, right? This is bypass cap that's been put in. It's a 10 microfarad, right? It's 10 microfarad at 63 volts, so they've got the voltage correct. But this should be 0.68 if you want a Marshall first stage. All right. Problem with this value here, it's kind of what you'd see in a Fender style cathode bypass, where you've got a kind of lot of nice big bottom end coming through, but it's in what is relatively clean preamp. Yeah. In a Marshall, this style of circuit, that's not what we want. It's too much bass. This cathode bypass cap is going to let through a lot of bottom end frequencies, which will tend to kind of bloat the preamp too much. Now, that won't explain why the amp is really, really bright, but it's certainly not going to help in terms of getting the kind of Marshall tones that the owner of this amp wants to get. I can also see by the brand of this capacitor that It's one of the things that you buy, one of the caps that you buy at our local electronics store here in Australia, JCar, which is kind of like, you know, hey, we all start somewhere. But you probably don't want to be buying caps from there going forward. They're just not great quality, and they've been sitting on the shelves forever. So there are better suppliers that you can purchase your parts from. Let me try and move to this 10K cathode, and I'll give you a look at that. Okay, here's the bypass cap on the 10K cathode. You can see it. It's 100 microfarad. Right, on a 10K cathode. It's ridiculous. It's the kind of bypass cap that you might see added to V2A, you know, the fat cap kind of thing. You put over the top of an 820 ohm resistor or a 1K. Across a 10K, the problem with this, right, is that the 10K cathode, it's a cold clipper. So if you look at the video that I put up on my channel about cathode resistors and how they set up the bias point or the operating point of the triode, you'll see that in a 10K cathode, it's near cutoff, which is why you get asymmetric clipping or cold clipping, as they call it. And if you put a bypass cap like this across it, you're pushing the thing into cutoff. It's just too dramatic, right? And it's just not going to sound great at all, which is, I think this will be a huge reason as to why this amp sounds pretty bad. So I'm going to replace both of these bypass caps, and we'll see how the amp is sounding after that. And then obviously I'm going to check all the voltages. 2204 horizontal input. Again, I've shown this in a previous video. The voltages here in the preamp are pretty high compared to the earlier 2204s that preceded it. And you can sweeten up the amp in terms of, you know, its tone by reducing the preamp voltages in these things. So if this amp needs that, in my view, I will do that as well. So you can see, guys, these amps are actually pretty easy to work on. As I said, once you unscrew these pots from the front and the jacks, the board will just flip out. Pretty easy to work on. But look what I found underneath it. This cap here. Not stock, right? Not stock. It's pretty hilarious, right? What this is, it's a bright cap. Remembering, right, these pots are mounted upside down, so this is the ground side and this is the input side. Input side here, ground side here. So this is a bright cap, right, between the input of the pot and the wiper, and it's on the volume. This is our preamp. You normally see a bright cap, right, on the preamp, and as we know, 2204s already have a bright cap. They have a 1 nanofarad bright cap, which is here at C5. What this is a 3.3 nanofarad. I've measured it with my LCR meter. It's a 3.3 nanofarad bright cap on the volume, which is just plain out stupid. Because this is why, I mean, the bypass on the 10K cathode, not good, but this is probably the main culprit, actually, which is why this amp is as bright as sin. Because you'd need to have this, to take this out of the circuit, bring the amp back into a kind of more balanced sound, you need to run this volume on 10. And I'm tipping the guy doesn't do that, right? So that's going to come out. We're going to remove these bypass caps, put the proper value in here, and then we'll see how this amp's sounding. So let's go through the changes that I've made. So underneath this volume pot here, I've obviously removed that 3.3 nanofarad bright cap. This 10 microfarad electrolytic bypass cap that was in here has come out, and I've replaced this with, it's a 0.68, right, standard Marshall. This 100 microfarad bypass cap that was on the 10K cathode is gone. That's come out. You can see I've grounded both of these, the shielded coax here that was in the amp. I've grounded the shield just to a grounding point. This is the bottom of the 100K cathode resistor on the cathode follower. This is at the bottom of the 10K cathode. So these are just convenient ground points here, so just ran a short lead there. And I'll come across to the power section of the amp. Okay, and here I've just inserted, I did this on the, if you look at the video that I've posted on the modding a horizontal 2204 to a vertical input specs, the main difference in that in that mod, or that change if you like, is getting the voltages in the preamp from the phase inverter onwards the same or very close to the vertical input 2204. So the simple thing you can do here without rewiring all the filtering is just put an extra 10k. This is a 3 watt 10k dropper here, and I put it in series with the original one. So you just pop up one leg and insert your 10k and bring it in. And when I measure the voltages in this amp, which I'll show you now, you'll see that it makes the world of difference. Okay, so let's just check the voltages here. All right, the amp's out of standby. So here we are on pin 3 of the power tubes, right? So this is the plate voltage, B plus 450. I'm at 240 volts on the mains here. And this is our B plus dropping network here. That's the halfway point. And you can see on the other side of this 10k, we're at 320. Now this is the supply voltage for phase inverter. So R18 here, this is the 82k plate resistor on the phase inverter. So the supply side of that is on this side of the board, the side facing me. So now our phase inverter supply node is 320. Now, before I put that extra 10k in, I was measuring 375 there. All right, 375 is okay, but it makes the amp a bit harsh, but kind of strident. And as we know in these Marshalls, 320 to 330 at this phase inverter supply node is the sweet spot. I do believe this. So just putting that 10k in there, I've already tested the amp just in the with my cab here in the workshop. It's sounding pretty cool. So I'm going to play that same loop through it, and we'll be able to do the before and after check, and we'll see how this thing's sounding.